Okay. I'd like to call to order the Avalon City Council meeting of Tuesday, April 16th. If we would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And begin. Under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if we could please have a few moments of silence for Ricardo Romero, Rudy Pilch, and Jimmy Guadagnino. Please be seated. Maybe we please have the roll call.
Councilmember Lavelle?
Here.
Councilmember Schickling?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ponce?
Here.
Mayor Marshall?
Here.
And Councilmember De La Rosa is absent.
Thank you. Are there any announcements or written communications?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Department head reports?
Good evening, everyone. Orncar Starfin, Harbor Master. Since my last report Tuesday, April 9th, Patrol moored 94 boats for a total of 580 nights. Patrol warned or advised 6 individuals of municipal code violations, issued 2 citations, responded to 4 medical calls, assisted the public 19 times, and completed 123 security checks of the facilities. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Good, we're good.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members, and City staff. Jackie Cordero, Public Works Director. A few updates. Public Works crew is continuing with the weed abatement around the city, trying to complete the work by June 1st. The hillside across Lovers Cove is still continuing to slough off. This area will be cleaned up in the next few weeks as we approach the end of the rainy season. We finished pothole repairs on Pebbly Beach Road, and we will start doing the potholes around town, probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then really fun event that we're participating in is the Weed Warrior Earth Day event. Monday, April 22nd, we'll have myself, Public Works crew member, the Weed Warriors out there pulling weeds, and we're meeting at the Casino Archway. Finally, if you haven't done so, please go to JMF. Look at the building that was recently painted. It looks beautiful. Our Public Works crew have been working really, really hard, and they're doing a lot of repair and restoration there in JMF. They'll be working throughout the weeks. And really, I just wanted to give a shout out to the crew. I've been so impressed these last few months. They're really small crew. And with all the repairs in the city, there's so much for them to do, and they're doing an outstanding job. I'm really proud of them. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Jackie.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City staff. Michael Alegria, Fire Chief. Community CPR, I gave the dates April 25th, May 2nd, and May 23rd. I got the word our ambulance should ship out from the Midwest on Friday and be able to go check it out next week on the mainland and just have radios installed and ship it over.
Wow.
Want to remind everyone that you cannot unload your freight in the fire lane. Keep the fire lane clear, please. Use the yellow zones, and we're going to be getting those painted and striped. But please use the yellow zone and brush clearance by June 1st.
Yeah. Questions, comments? Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City staff. Since our last meeting, we've had 70 calls for service. 27 observations were made by deputies. During those, we had a an arrest for open container, an arrest for driving without a license, 2 drunken publics, and a domestic violence arrest. There were 8 traffic stops made in the last week, and 3 resulted in 3 citations. Currently, we're still working on the helmets. We have several donors lined up. We have 150 helmets committed right now, and then we should be getting hopefully another 25. So we're hoping the grand total is about 175 helmets for the school kids. And then once I get a date for them to be delivered, we'll set up a date at the school, and we'll have a presentation and hopefully some education on bicycle safety and that kind of thing. And I think that's it for last week.
Comments? Oh, yeah, because that was just since last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been busy.
I had a quick question for you on, I know there's different rules regarding motorcycles and then off-road bikes, right?
Yes.
I didn't know if it's possible just to do checks for licenses. Those are separate licenses than regular traditional DMV driver
Well,
license, right?
You can obviously target motorcycles and bikes and whatever you want to target, but you have to have probable cause to make the stop.
Right.
Like today, I stopped a motorcycle specifically for that reason, unlicensed, and it's a common problem we have on the island. A lot of people tend to buy the toy and not have the license to use the toy, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it's something we're working on and
Okay.
trying to educate them, and anyone listening to this should realize that if you don't have a license, don't buy the bike.
Right.
Wait until you have that and then get on the bike. Just today alone, I ended up being a misdemeanor, arrest basically, and then not stopping for the stop sign, and then no insurance, and then no registration. So it really adds up.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish people would realize before they get involved in that, they get themselves ready to go and go to DMV and take care of it.
Yeah,
That's the hard part about the island, is that, people don't want to go over to town, but then you shouldn't buy the bike.
Right.
That's what it comes down to.
I think that's part of it. And there was also, I remember there used to be training classes, and I think they still have them on the weekends at the VA in Long Beach. So if anyone is wanting to get their motorcycle license and get a space where they can actually practice and train before they take that test with the DMV, that was a regular occurrence. I was there every week, so I don't know if it's still going on, but up until.
Yeah, I'll take a look into that.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have it at the VA or not. So Long Beach Hospital there?
Yeah, at the VA, they used to have it in the parking lot there,
Off
actually.
of Bellflower.
Yeah, off of Bellflower and
Atherton.
7th. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's no way you can, like if they're minor children, young people, is there any way you can confiscate it and then have their parents come and pick them up, or do you do something like that, or?
Yeah, that's typical, our only option now. If they're unlicensed, they can't drive away on it, so we have to have someone come pick it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can ask them to wheel it home, that's fine. The unfortunate issue we really have right now is that we don't really have a place to take the vehicle. So
Uh-huh.
even though they're out driving 3 or 4 times, there's no way to impound it or to even secure that vehicle right now. We have no
Right.
place to put them.
Right. I have a question. I noticed a couple weeks ago, one of your bigger vehicles was taken away on a flatbed.
Yeah.
Whose flatbed was that?
I don't know, but I know you're talking about, but I don't know who.
If we
who
could
took
find
it.
out, because, we talked about we're not able to get those vehicles off the island, but they managed, if we booted them, but they managed to get that big old, you got rid of yours. So I'm just curious if
Yeah, the county may have barged it over because
Oh,
the
okay.
county has deep pockets when it comes to fixing their vehicles and that kind of thing, but I don't know, honestly.
Okay.
I'll have to find out.
okay. Maybe we can borrow.
And the
it.
issue, Mayor, isn't necessarily,
Question.
it's more than just we can get the vehicles off the island. The problem is we have to store them for a 15-day waiting period on island.
Okay.
So that's what we need, is a secured storage area that meets the specifications.
We can just take them all up to JMF.
Yeah. We just got that cleaned up.
Yeah, the storage is a huge issue, and it's
It
something
is.
we desperately need. It makes a tremendous difference, and I haven't worked everywhere in the county, but this is the only place I have worked in the county that doesn't have a place to
I
take
know,
vehicles.
yeah.
So it makes it much more difficult to enforce a lot of the laws of like unregistered vehicles and people
Yes.
driving out of license.
Sure, I understand. Yeah, thanks.
Stuff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Matt, are you coming out, or we're gonna see you later? I know we're gonna see you later.
Later.
Okay, Matt's gonna forego his presentation.
Wants to save his time.
Yeah.
Good evening, Council, Madam Mayor. We have a lot of events from here until the next time we meet, which is going to be almost 3 weeks. The first one being this Thursday, April 18th, is the Catalina Island Resident Resource Fair. It's brought to you by the Office of LA County Supervisor Janice Hahn, the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health, the City of Avalon, and Catalina Island Health will be presenting this. It's a free community event. They'll have food there, application assistance from Medi-Cal, family support information, housing assistance, immigration assistance, mental health support, and more. They are also going to be working with us with our unhoused. And so what they're doing is they're bringing a mobile clinic so we can give a free checkup to our unhoused and the boaters who may not have access. They also are looking to work with the city to see resources that they can help bring to the city for our unhoused. I'll give you some more updates on that later.
And that's from,
On Saturday at 4:20, come fly a kite with us. The Kite Festival will be happening this Saturday. It was rained out last Saturday, but we've moved it to this Saturday now. And it will be from 2 to 5 p.m. right after the high school softball game. We have kites for sale here at City Hall, or on the day of, you can buy it as well up at Joe Machado Field. $5 for the small ones, $10 for the big ones. Hire a Lancer Day will be happening on April 23rd up at the Avalon Schools Gymnasium from 4:30 to 6 p.m. So if you're looking to hire a young employee, you can go up there and they will bring the kids around to each of the booths. So if you need a booth, please check in with Avalon Schools with either Paul Romo or Melinda Clare. On Saturday, May 4th, is Old Man Rugby Tournament up at JMF from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. This is another legacy event that comes and fills our island in the shoulder seasons. So we think it'd be great if you go up and you enjoy these older gentlemen reliving their youth and then later filling up our restaurants and bars. The day after that, Saturday, May 5th, is our annual Cinco de Mayo event down on Wrigley Stage starting at 3 p.m. We will be having Father Dario from the Catholic Church who will be doing a mass to bless the town and praying for the fruitfulness of the season, followed by multiple folklorico dancers from 4 o'clock to 5:30. That's all our kids, as well as our 3 main dance groups that we have on the island. More information to come out later on that, so look at our website, cityofavalon.com. Finally, our reveal for the 4th of July theme, the Golden Age of Avalon, swinging in the 20s and 30s. This is when Avalon was truly burgeoning as a city. We will be celebrating 100-year anniversary of the Avalon Schools and the Yacht Club. It's the time of the building of the casino and the movie theater that helped to bring some of the big bands and top bands of the era to the island. Also where Hollywood's elite would come and mingle and shoot their movies. Dress in your best wool bathing suit, Art Deco your golf cart, dress as Charlie Chaplin, Errol Flynn, Joan Crawford, Betty Grable, Clark Gable, or even Duke. Okay. So many fun ideas you can dress the town up with, and more information coming on that as well soon. Any questions?
Great theme.
yeah.
What was that?
Great theme.
Oh, thank you. Awesome.
Swinging into the 20s, 30s, and 40s?
Just the 20s and 30s. The
20s
40s
and
is
30s.
mostly the
40s
war
were the
time
war
and
years, man.
the recovery after the war. So.
You remember it well.
I remember it well.
That's great, thank you. Assistant City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. 3 event reminders. On Saturday, April 27th, starting at 9 a.m. at the Wrigley Stage, will be the monthly community litter pickup with a focus on Earth Day. There'll be some giveaways and goodies for volunteers that come out and join us for that Earth Day pickup. In addition, Thursday, May 2nd is the ending date for the Vehicle Amnesty Program. So if you and yours are interested in participating in the program, you have until Thursday, May 2nd to participate. Lastly, I've been working with CR&R to coordinate a field trip to the Stanton MRF facility on Monday, May 20th. The idea is to take the 7:50 boat over and the 2 p.m. boat back. CR&R will schedule transportation from the ferry terminal to the Stanton facility. So if you are interested, please let me know. I'm excited to see where all of our recycling and appliances and e-waste go. So yeah, that concludes my update.
Okay, any questions? Great, thank
Great,
you.
thanks.
That sounds like an exciting field trip. City manager report. Oh,
Kelly?
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
Hiding behind that mask, I don't know who you are.
I know.
You're being
Good
good.
evening, Mayor and Council.
Oh,
Kelly
sorry.
Rebuffo, Contract Planner. I just have a brief update for you tonight. Tomorrow's Planning Commission meeting is a short agenda. We have 2 items. One is a conditional use permit for the Immersed Education Dome Theater. Previously, they'd been approved for a temporary use, but are asking to be made a permanent use on the property. And the other item is a report from BBK. They're going to be giving Planning Commission sort of an informational update on some forthcoming code amendments related to wireless facilities. The city has not updated its regulations in some time to comply with FCC regulations, so I think we're going to get an idea of what's coming. Give Planning Commission an opportunity to ask any questions before we actually bring that legislation forward.
Okay,
And that is it.
questions? Okay, thank you. City manager report.
I think we're ready. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, Council. A couple things. Planning Commission vacancies are still open until May 1st. If you're interested, please go to the city website, fill out an application. And those appointments will begin in July, in the Planning Commission meeting in July. So May 1st is the deadline for that. Circuit and Coast continues to fine-tune its operation. We have an official, I guess, hard opening or grand opening for them will be this Thursday. But as soon as those vehicles, and that's just because we're going to surround that with more promotion and really try to push it out, even though they've been, I think anytime you see them out there, they generally have passengers in them. This Thursday will be their official opening date, even though they've been in operation for about 10 days now. And then as soon as they're wrapped, we'll get that message out to council and figure out where we're going to do that photo. And then finally, I just want to announce that last Friday we were notified by Department of Boating and Waterways that we received a $300,000 grant for the Club Dinghy Dock. And this is extremely important because that was a project to replace that dinghy dock we had to do anyway. It was to the point of beyond repair, so it was going to be on us, and for us to get this grant is a huge benefit because that was a must project, not a need, not a want. And I really just want to give a shout out and thanks to Kevin Schmidt, Assistant Harbor Master, and then Aliana Gonzalez, who prepared that grant and went to bat for us, and it's great when that comes through. So all things go the right way a year from now, hopefully, knock on wood, next May, next April, we'll have a new dinghy dock going in there, and it'll be ADA compatible is how they're working on it,
So that's
designing it.
built on the mainland?
The ramp will probably be built on the mainland and brought over, but it'll be 180-foot shot, 180-foot ramp going directly down to a new set of floats that are down there that makes it ADA compatible, and then it'll have a rigging system so they can be brought up during weather conditions. So again, that's exciting. Anytime we can get a grant like that or any kind of grant, it frees up other CIP money for these other projects that we have going on. Yes. Just real quickly, I just want to mention, because a few people have asked questions about the short-term rentals. We are really working hard, and what we had to do is go back, we determined, to 1988 Planning Commission meetings and work our way forward in order to identify all the short-term rentals that have been granted either a CUP or more recently licensed in the city. And we're working our way through that because we think it's critical to clearly define the number that we're talking about rather than just these hypotheticals. So that's what's taking time right now is to get that, but I think we'll be able to move pretty quickly, and as soon as we get that, we'll get that information to Planning Commission and on to you.
Great.
Any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have a city attorney?
Yes, and I'll be there on May 7th for training, and then I'll be there available for office hours in the middle of the day before the council meeting that night.
Excellent. All right, nice to see you, Scott.
Nice to see y'all.
Okay, council member reports.
I'll go first because it's short. Just a reminder, Rotary is sponsoring a clothing drive next Saturday, the 27th, from 10 to 2. Please no early birds, and it is over at 2. So, and it'll be right in the corner, the curve, right outside of the Catalina Canyon.
Great. Okay,
And yes, you can bring shoes,
yes, thank you.
Good to know.
Okay.
because somebody asked.
Nothing happened for me this week, and I'm sorry for all the coughing. I'm not sick, I'm not contagious.
Thank you.
It's something else.
Okay.
Attended a quick meeting with the team from ALADS this week, and so got to meet some of the representatives who help represent the sheriff's department, and had a great discussion with them, and they were asking if there were any things that we would want their assistance with in the future as well. So just let them know about a couple of community events that are coming up they may want to volunteer at, but otherwise, mentioned that I think a lot of things are going in the right direction with regard to our contract with the sheriff team. They'll be out at Cal Cities in Indian Wells, and so I know Councilmember De La Rosa will be there, and they gave me the booth number for them to be able to connect while they're there. And then I'm heading to the school board meeting tomorrow evening in Long Beach, and otherwise, yeah, had a couple of calls regarding broadband. I'm hoping that we can either discuss it tonight or bring it back for the next meeting to talk about the possibility of the city inputting some funds into a potential application coming up in the future through Gateway Cities. So, yeah, hopefully we'll have more on that soon.
Go ahead, Mayor. Oh, you're done. I'm done. We were just here, right, 7 days ago?
We were.
Right? Excellent,
Right.
excellent. Okay, so we're gonna move on to oral communication. This is an opportunity for people in the audience to speak on items that are not on the agenda. You will be limited to 2 minutes and no action will be taken. Val, unless you have something to report, you're the only person in the audience that doesn't have business. But do you have anything on your, no, okay. All righty. Presentation. Oh, you didn't save it till the last.
Good evening, Council. Matt Baker, Finance Director. Tonight will be the first of our budget workshops for the fiscal year 24-25 budget. Our budget workshop order is going to change slightly from how we've done it in the past couple of years. Tonight I'm going to try to get through our operating revenue estimates and beginning fund balance heading into the next fiscal year, as well as provide Council with kind of the current draft of our operating expenditures. Again, we're kind of sharing with you our working draft of the budget, so all of the numbers in here may change between now and when we present it in June, but we wanted to give you more of an opportunity to review where we're at, take it home, ask questions of any of the department heads over the next few weeks and really a month and a half. So that way when we're presenting the full budget in June, you'll have plenty of time to be familiar with it. And again, the other goal of trying to condense all this into this meeting is that will provide us with 2 meetings in May to be able to go over CIP. We have quite the CIP list planned for the next fiscal year, and it was going to be hard to get that all into one meeting. And so I think if we can get through this tonight, that'll free up 2 meetings in May to really go into detail into our CIP budget for next year. right, so this slide is, should be familiar. It's one I begin every budget presentation with. Just a reminder, our goal is to operate in a structurally balanced budget. What we mean by that is that our recurring ongoing revenues are enough to cover all of our recurring ongoing expenditures. So that way any one-time revenues come in aren't being relied on to cover those recurring expenditures, things like salaries and contracts and things of that nature. Again, when we're putting together a budget, we want to make sure our revenue estimates are conservative. One of the challenges we have as a city is we are very dependent on visitor-driven revenues. They can fluctuate more than, say, a property tax or some other revenues out there. And so when we're setting the revenue targets, we need to be mindful that we're setting it at a level we're confident we can hit. Again, one of our goals is to be transparent in everything we're doing, so I want to make sure everyone understands how I come up with the revenue estimates, because it's really those revenue estimates that drive what funds are available then to fund our operating costs. And then lastly, as new revenues come in, we first need to make sure we have monies to cover our normal increases to fixed costs. So every year our insurance costs go up, salaries go up, things of that nature. So when we have new monies coming in, first we need to make sure we have enough to cover those recurring costs. We need to make sure we have sufficient reserves, and if we don't, to dedicate that money to building up reserves. Then to pay down any debt. We're fortunate to where we don't have a lot of different varieties of debt, but we do have some unfunded pension liabilities as well as unfunded OPEB or post-employment benefit liabilities. Then the next thing on the list, if we were to prioritize, would be make sure we're maintaining the capital equipment we already have, whether that's replacing vehicles or maintaining the infrastructure we have in town. And then lastly, any kind of new discretionary expenditures would be where those monies should go. Again, I mentioned it earlier, but this is a draft of the budget. We are still working with department heads, Dave and I, to go over what the budget requests are. So all the numbers that are in this presentation are likely to change between now and when we're actually presenting for adoption. Probably not significantly, and probably a number of them won't change at all. But I just want to caveat it with, this isn't the budget we're asking you to adopt. This is just where we're at in the process. And then just as a reminder, when I'm talking operating expenditures, what I mean are salaries and benefits, maintenance and operations, so those would be rent, utilities, office supplies, things of that nature. Contract services, so in the general fund, our biggest contract would be the sheriff's contract, but shore boat services, things of that nature would fall under contracts. And then lastly, internal services, and again, that's how we allocate the costs for certain departments that benefit all departments. So for example, finance does payroll for the fire department and the harbor department, so we have to charge those departments for our services, and not just finance, but admin, the garage, other internal service funds. Real quick, this is a pie chart showing our general fund revenues. Really the key takeaway is if you look at TOT, which is for hotels, TOT for vacation rentals, which is the light blue, sales tax and ad tax, that's about 3/4 of our general fund's operating revenues. And those are all very much visitor driven or visitor dependent. So then property tax, licenses, permits, charges for services, those make up only about 1/4 of the city's operating budget. So again, this is a chart that compares revenues from fiscal year 19 to 24. And again, after tonight, I'm going to have this slide on the finance page, and I'll email everyone in council so they'll be able to look at it in more detail. But you can see in fiscal year 19, that was a pre-COVID year. We have a drop in 20, and what's kind of hidden in that drop is we were actually having a pretty strong fiscal year for the first 3 quarters of fiscal year 20. But obviously COVID had an impact as well as in 21. But you see in 22, that was largely driven by an increase in our visitor-driven revenues, TOT in particular. And then if you look at over fiscal 22, 3, 4, we're sort of plateauing and even at a slight decline. The one thing I'll say though is that fiscal year 24, that is an estimate, and that's kind of on my low end of the estimate range. This slide here shows it at the kind of the higher end of the estimate range, and I'll go into more detail. And also, if you take away the one-time ARPA monies we received in fiscal year 22, you really see we really kind of have plateaued. So I know it does show a slight decline, but if you kind of take away those one-time monies, And while plateauing's, not necessarily where we want to be, it certainly is a stronger position than where we were in fiscal years 19, 20, and 21. Again, these are all the non-visitor driven revenues, and you can see from fiscal year 19 to 24, they've been relatively flat, but it's our visitor driven revenues that really is where the growth has been. This chart right here shows the revenues collected through March over the last 3 fiscal years. So you have March 22, for example, we had collected 3.8 million in TOTs as of March 31st, and we finished the year for hotels at 6 million. So if you fast forward to the second column to the right, the fiscal year 24 through March of this year, we've collected 3.5 million. And on the low end of my estimate, I think we'll probably come in somewhere around 5.2 million for TOT from hotels. At the high end of the range, I think we might come in around 5.6 million TOT for hotels. And kind of what those low end, high end estimates, where they're really coming from is looking at February through June. So again, February's TOT wouldn't be due till March 31st. And so what I did is I put an estimate together of, if you look at the first 8 months of our fiscal year, our TOT revenues have been down about 5%. So if I said if that trend continues between now and June, we would have TOT somewhere close to 7.8 million. And so that's what I used as kind of the low end of my estimate range. If TOT for those last 4 months come in somewhere in between where they did in fiscal year 22 and where they did in fiscal year 23, again, fiscal 22 was a really strong year. Fiscal 23 had weather somewhat similar to the early spring we've had this year. But if you remember last year, May and June were pretty gloomy and cloudy, and I'm thinking there's a chance we might have some sun one of these days. Yeah. So. At the high end of the range, you can see 8.2 is probably where TOT will come in for the year. Again, so then fiscal year 22, we did about 8.6. Last year, we did 8.3. And this year, potentially, we're looking at somewhere between 7.8 and 8.2. And so kind of looking at where we were at last 3 years, I came up with some preliminary revenue estimates for next year. Again, I'm hoping we do better than these numbers as a city, but I want to make sure we're budgeting at a level where there's a high degree of confidence to where we'll hit those numbers. So for TOT, for hotels and vacation rentals right now, and kind of the budget we're developing, we're looking at a TOT revenue number of 7.5 million. The current year budget used 7 million as our number, but like I said, we're probably going to come in somewhere between 7.8 and 8.2. So 7.5 still provides some cushion if we don't have as strong of a year next year as we did this year. If you see, one of the few positive numbers on there is the city sales tax. I have that up 5.9% from my low end estimate, and that number is coming from our sales consultant. I may end up changing that number, but I just wanted to provide an explanation for why most of them I have going down, but why sales tax is up. Property tax is down 11.9%, but that's really because of our ROPS admin allowance was decreased this year from 250,000 to 150,000. And so that's really what's driving that decrease there. And then lastly, in other revenues, this is one I know I'm likely low on, but in the bottom right corner, you see I have 383,000 as the other revenues. Most of other revenues is our interest income. One of the benefits we've had over the last several years is we've really been able to build up our reserves, and I'll show that in a later slide. And the other positive is interest rates have been a lot better than they have historically, or at least in the last 5 to 10 years. And so we've really been able to benefit from that. And so I think we'll likely exceed that number with interest income, but I don't want to rely on that interest income number in order to balance the budget, because the Fed could drop rates, a lot of things could happen. We may be drawing down on some of those reserves for CIP, and so I figured I'd keep it as a lower end, and if at mid-year we see there's some room to up that revenue, we always can. But that's kind of where I came up with, and so you can see fiscal 24, we finished the year with 13.5 is my estimate, and that's the low end estimate range. For next budget year, right now we're kind of working on a budget with operating revenues of 12.8 million. Again, all these numbers could change based on how the numbers come in February or in March, April. But that's kind of where we're looking at from a revenue estimate standpoint. So what that means for reserves is last year going into the budget, we expected we'd have an unassigned fund balance or reserves, if you will, in our general fund of $14.3 million. They actually came in at $14.9 million. And that's because when we were building the budget last year, I used the low end estimate of the revenues in order to kind of come up with that number. And so our actual kind of reserves heading into the year were $14.9 million. If everything goes as estimated, and that's in the fiscal year 24 low column, our operating revenues for the year would have exceeded our operating expenditures by 1.8 million. And really what's driving that is our TOT we had in the budget of 7 million, and it's going to be somewhere between 7.8 and 8.2. So a lot of that difference from where we thought we'd be in the budget and where I'm now projecting we'll finish the year is really driven by that increase in TOT between the budget estimate and the actual. And so what all this means, and I see it's kind of getting blocked by the translation, but I'll provide a copy of the presentation after the meeting, is we're going to finish the year assuming we spend all the CIP that was in the budget this year, somewhere around 13.5 million in funds available or unrestricted fund balance in the general fund. Again, that number is going to be higher because there's quite a bit of capital spend in the budget this year that we're not going to get to before June 30th. And so those funds will roll over into the next year's budget. But if you kind of want to view those projects as all being done and completed, we still would have about 13.5 million in fund balance in the general fund after the planned spend from this year. Right now, that 12.8 million I said for the revenue estimate, if we took the budget as kind of proposed by the department heads for an operating budget, we would have a net operating revenue of 328,000. Again, that's before factoring any capital money, so we want to make sure our operating revenues are exceeding our operating expenditures by a considerable amount because we still have to factor in all of the capital spend that would be needed for the general fund. So anything from funding vehicle replacement for fire trucks, the Five Corners project, et cetera. Again, I don't want to focus too long on these numbers because these are all going to change over the next few months. But if we were to adopt the budget as presented today, that's what this table is showing. So this is a chart comparing operating revenues and expenditures over the last 6 years. So the first year on there being pre-COVID-19. You can see our operating revenues exceeded our operating expenditures in pre-COVID-19, but not by a whole lot, which meant we weren't really generating a lot of money to fund capital projects. You can see in fiscal year 20, our operating expenditures exceeded our operating revenues. Obviously, COVID was impacted in 20, and a lot of our cuts really didn't take effect until 21, just given the timing of when that occurred. And again, these numbers here don't show the impacts of capital spend that we were already doing in the fiscal year. This is just looking at the operating revenues and expenditures. But you can see beginning really in 21, but more significantly in 22, we had our operating revenues jump up. And again, that was driven by our increase in visitor-driven revenues, primarily TOT. Part of that spike, though, is because of those one-time ARPA money. So if you take away the effect of that, you can kind of see it flattens out a bit. But again, trend-wise, we would like to see our operating revenues growing kind of in parallel with our increases in operating expenditures. It's not something that we need to panic about, but it's something we need to keep in mind on going forward, is that we're not seeing 5-7% growth in our revenue numbers while our expenditures are growing, say, at 5% a year. So in the long run, that's not a trend that's sustainable. But one of the reasons I'm not quite as concerned as I would be is that increase in our reserves. So kind of going into COVID, we had 4.5 million in reserves, and now we have 14. And so that's 3 to 4 months of operating expenditures versus a year plus of operating expenditures. And so while it's something we need to keep an eye on how our operating expenditures are growing relative to our operating revenues, we are in a stronger position than we were previously just because we do have those larger reserves. So this is a breakdown of our operating expenditures by department for the general fund. What's kind of blocked here is fire and harbor make up about half. But this other category also includes our chamber allocation. So if you take away the chamber allocation, since we really don't have any discretion on how those funds get spent, it's more of a pass-through. You can see that law enforcement makes up about 55% of our operating expenditures in the general fund. Public Works, I believe, is blocked there, but I believe it's 17%. Planning with 6, Rec with 13, and then other with 10. If you want to look at it from a type of expenditure basis in the general fund, 38% of it's salaries and benefits in the general fund, 26% contract services. Maintenance, which is blocked there, is 10%, and internal services is 26%. And really within that internal service number is largely labor. That would be finances labor, as well as the admin, the city manager's office is labor, as well as the garage. So a lot of that, even within internal services, is labor as well. So again, this is just breaking down the proposed operating expenditures by department. I don't want to spend too much time on it other than to kind of explain what this graph shows, and just to give council the opportunity over the coming weeks and months to review this presentation and come to the departments if they have any questions. So if we're looking at it from an operating expenditure standpoint, you can see our operating expenditures exceeded 10 million in fiscal 19, that's pre-COVID. And right now in the budget, we're looking at operating expenditures over 12 million. If you take away the impact from the increase in TOT, so again, when our TOT increases, we also have an increase in our chamber allocation. So this chart here kind of takes away the impact of the chamber increase. And so if you look, we had operating expenditures around 9 million going in fiscal year 19, and this year I think it's just under 11 million is what right now is being proposed. So over a 6-year period, I believe it's a 17% increase. CPI over that same period, I looked it up today, was around 23%. So, you know, every year our costs do go up, but, you know, we're doing our best to try to manage that growth while still restoring services that were previously cut. And so that's 17% from the 19 number, not from the low in 21. And this is just a summary table breaking down the operating expenditures by department and fund type. So you could see the fire department, for example, has salaries and benefits of 2.5 million and a total budget of 3.5 million. And again, those internal services, those are going to be admin, insurance, and vehicle maintenance of the garage. And that's the fire department's share of those three funds costs. So this is a summary of our law enforcement. As you can see, that blue represents contract services, and so you can see the growth from 19 to 25. The next slide, and I'm not going to spend too much slide, I put together a detail page for every department. And so what the detail page shows is in fiscal year 25, the amount that's currently being used as we develop our budget. Again, we don't have a final contract from the sheriff, so I'm using an estimate for the contract costs. That number, by the time we present a budget, we'll have a more firm number, or we should have a final number to present to council. But one of the challenges is as we're building the budget, we're also getting input from our various contractors. And so that's not a firm number by any means, but I tried to put a number that I felt confident was going to be on the high end. That way, you know, when we come back and present a final budget, it's something better I can present rather than something higher. But you can see the column in the middle is the dollar amount currently being considered in the upcoming budget, and the percentage is the percentage increase from the prior year's budgeted amount. And that's the prior year's budgeted amount factoring in any mid-year amendments. So again, similar with the fire department, I'm not going to go through all the details on these, but I wanted to have council the opportunity to look at them in the next month or so and either come to the department heads or at the next council meeting, come with any questions they have on any of the operating budgets. But you can see fire department's budget's largely driven by its labor budget, and its labor budget has gone up, but only by about 200,000 between fiscal 22 and 25, or fiscal 19 and 25. Again, this is a breakdown of all the operating expenditures currently being considered in the fire department's budget. Public Works I wanted to highlight because you can really see the impact of the COVID cuts on their department. particularly with the labor slide here, but you can also see we've been, relative to the others, quick to restore some of those cuts. And so its operating budget from a staffing standpoint, and there's a slide later to show it, is still down 2 full-time equivalents, but they are the admin analyst position and the admin assistant position that was previously in Public Works. So from a maintenance worker standpoint, with the current proposed budget, I think at a maintenance level, it's comparable to our pre-COVID staffing, and that is with some vacancies in the proposed budget. Again, I'm not going to go into details, but this will give you guys the opportunity to review any of the operating expenditures currently proposed. Planning, there's been a lot of changes in kind of the staffing levels of planning in fiscal 19. We contracted our building inspection services, and we had a planning director. In fiscal 25, we have a building inspector, but we contract some of those planning director services. So that's why you kind of see the mix shift a lot within planning. Then next with recreation, you can see really in recreation, a lot of the growth is in that green color, and that is the internal services. And so when I come up with the internal service estimate, there's a number of things I look at. I look at staffing levels, I look at the size of their budget, and kind of the volume of transactions are some of the factors that I look at. One of the pieces right now is because the Chamber's allocation of the TOT has grown from, say, 1.2 million in fiscal 19 to 1.8 million last year. Their share of the internal services has kind of skewed upwards, and so I'm going to have to look at how I'm allocating to see if that really makes sense. Again, the green number isn't something Dave has control over. It's how I try to assign admin's time and finance's time fairly. And so if you take away that, you can see that it's not that steep of an increase. And that real green increase is being driven kind of by that formula. And so that's one of the things I always look at during the development of the budget is, do our internal service allocations still make sense? I try to ground it in numbers so no one can say I'm picking favorites, but there's some basis for how I allocate my costs. But that's really where that growth has been in his department. So if you take that out, you can see it's actually down slightly, and that's because we've changed our maintenance positions that previously were grouped under recreation. We've moved them to Public Works. And so that's why you see that dip in 25. Again, there's a breakdown of the operating budget for rec. And then lastly, other general fund. You can see in 19, there was no green, there was no internal service. In 20, I looked at how we were doing the internal service allocations and made some changes. And what I did was I said any fund that we wouldn't assign internal service costs directly to, the general fund picks up their share. So for example, there's finance time involved with the housing authority, but I don't charge our housing funds any of my time for the work I do for the housing fund. But it's also not necessarily fair for the harbor to have to pick that up. So kind of those special revenues funds times get charged to the general fund. And so that's why you first see the green in fiscal year 20. Part of the reason it's grown so much is the hospital admin kind of falls under that category. And with Measure H being such a large number, it's kind of skewing my allocations. And so that's something I'm going to be looking at between now and when we present it to budget. But that's one of the reasons why you see that growth in their green share, because relative to other spend, the spend in the hospital administration has grown because of Measure H. And to an extent, I think it's fair because there is more of staff's time, finance, and admin now managing that process. So I'm not saying that there isn't a good basis for it, but it is something I'm going to look at to make sure that it's not skewed too far. So then moving along into the harbor, you can see it follows a pattern similar to the general fund, but not quite as extreme, where you have a dip in 20 and 21, and then a increase in 22, and that sort of plateaued over the last few years. And a lot of that is attributable to changes in our cruise ship revenue. So this shows cruise ship revenues in 19 and 20 were about 600,000. We had no cruise ship revenue in 21. In 22, it was back up to about 600,000. In 23, I believe it was 1.5. And this year, I think cruise ship revenue is going to come in somewhere 1.75 million. So here's a breakdown if you want to look at revenues kind of all the harbor revenues from pre-COVID fiscal 19 all the way to the numbers I'm using in the budget estimate. So you can see in 19, the total operating revenues in the harbor were 8.3 million. And in the 25 budget that I'm working off of, I'm using a 9.1 million number currently, compared to the 9.4 million that I estimate we're going to collect this year. And again, I'm estimating a number lower than where we've collected the last few years to make sure we're setting a target we're confident we can hit. And this is just to show how I came up with the $1.8 million number for cruise ship wharfage. There were 112 scheduled cruise ships to arrive in fiscal year 25 based on the schedule as of a couple weeks ago when I put this together. And comparing that with fiscal year 19, you can see we had 113 arrivals. So what we're seeing is not an increase in the number of cruise ships arriving, but where we are seeing the increase is in the number of passengers on those ships. A lot of that has to do with kind of the trend in the cruise industry. The two Carnival ships we had prior to COVID topped out around 2,500 passengers, and the Carnival ships that have since replaced them, not even considering the new one that is coming, carry about 3,500 passengers with them on average. And so really that's where we're seeing the growth in the cruise ships, not in the number coming to town or the number of days they're here. It's just in the number of passengers that are on board those ships.
Let me ask a question, and Michael can probably answer, well, you all can answer it, but when we first started getting the cruise ships, we were working out this deal where
So there used to be, if you had a second ship for 50 or more days, half of the wharfage essentially got refunded back. Currently, there's no ship that meets those criteria, so we aren't having any. It was a marketing incentive, I believe, is how it was referred to. And if there were two ships from the same cruise line that come 50 or more times a year, then half of the wharfage on the second ship would be returned as a marketing incentive. That 112 in fiscal, or 113 in fiscal year 19 did involve us having a marketing incentive refund because Carnival did send over 100 ships in 19. In 25, there aren't any currently scheduled that would meet that criteria for that refund. That's also, I think, a good point to bring up. While we have about the same number of cruise ships, one of the things that has changed since COVID is we have more cruise operators coming more days, whereas in fiscal year 19, Carnival made up 90+% of our cruise ship arrivals. And while Carnival still brings the most ships to town, Disney and Royal Caribbean have increased the number of visits relative to 2019. And so we're more diverse in that sense as far as where the cruise ship visitors are coming from.
Thank you.
Again, I don't want to dwell too much on working capital here for the harbor because a lot of it's going to be dependent on how much CIP we spend between now and June 30th. Again, this is kind of earlier in the budget process, so I really haven't looked in detail of where we're on some of those projects. But you can see entering into fiscal year 21 and 22, we actually had negative working capital in the harbor fund, which meant we really didn't have any funds available in the short term to do any purchasing. So again, working capital is our current assets, so cash and receivables minus current liabilities, so any kind of payables or amounts that we're going to be due within the year. So you can see both those years we really were coming in with no money in the harbor fund. The general fund can always step in when the harbor fund had no money, and you can see in 23 going into fiscal 23, so at the end of fiscal 22, after its strong year, they had a working capital of 1.3 million. In 24, going into the beginning of fiscal year 24, they had a working capital of 2.5 million. And I put the asterisks on 25 because if you go back and look at our current year fiscal year 24 budget, the harbor was basically going to spend that 2.5 million on various CIP projects. But our revenues have beat our estimates. So even if we were to have spent that entire 2.5 million, because of that revenues exceeding our revenue estimates in the budget, we'd have a working capital probably around 700,000 or so. Again, we're not going to spend that full amount that was in the budget in the current year. I can think of multiple projects that we had six-figure spend plan that are going to get moved to the next year budget. So we'll provide a better working capital number as we get closer to presenting the budget for adoption. But I know it gets asked a lot of what are our reserves looking like, and so I just kind of wanted to briefly touch on that. So kind of focusing on the operating revenues in the budget, I mentioned earlier that we are looking at 9.1 million. Operating expenditures in the Harbor Fund, 8.6 million. And so that has our operating revenues exceeding our expenditures by about 500,000. But the one thing is that some of those revenues we dedicate to harbor capital, whether that's capital maintenance or capital projects. And so looking at just 103 and 114, if we were to take the budget as currently being presented to you, we would have a draw, our operating revenues exceeding our operating expenditures exceeding our revenues by 200,000. Again, this isn't a budget we're going to present for adoption. We just kind of want to show you where we're at in the process. A lot of these numbers are going to change, whether it's increases on the revenue side or cuts on the expenditure side.
Matt, I know that number's going to change, but does that include the newest funding for the 300,000 for the dinghy dock?
So this wouldn't include the dinghy dock, no. And so here's just a breakdown of the harbor doesn't really have departments per se, but we do break down their expenditures by category. We have admin, and so that would be harbor master, assistant harbor master, and the admin support team. Operations is going to include it's going to include harbor patrol as well as the 3 dedicated harbor maintenance workers fall under harbor operations. A portion of the public works team's time, I want to say about 25-30% of it, gets charged directly to the harbor, and so that's that 5.7 FTEs in the public works category. And then a portion of the public works director and the harbor master's time gets charged to the capital fund, and so that's that 0.3 number there. So again, we have kind of a working draft of where everyone's budgets are. I'm going to kind of fly through some of these, but over the coming weeks, if you could take a look, and if you have any questions, probably the next 2 presentations I'll have, I'm going to just open it up with any questions as well as providing council with any updates if we have some major changes between now and then. So similarly, here's harbor operations, and you're going to see a pattern. You're going to see the numbers in 2019 then start to dip as we made those cuts for COVID, and then you're going to see them come back up as we've restored staffing and benefits and things of that nature. So then lastly, we're going to talk quickly about the internal service funds. So again, that's the admin team, finance, city attorney, as well as our elected officials, the insurance fund, and that's where we charge our general liability and property insurance, and the vehicle maintenance fund, which is our garage. So again, just real quick on elected, right now we do have a training budget in there, and that's really the only maintenance and operating expenditures that falls under elected. We didn't come close to spending that amount this year, but I just kept the amount the same from last year's budget. So this is a breakdown of our admin expenditures and the detail that kind of goes into that. You can see a lot of that is on labor. The one thing that does kind of get lost, and if you have questions, I'm happy to go into detail, is we have made some changes to how the city manager and assistant city manager's time is allocated between fiscal 19 and 24. So some of that isn't new people. Some of that increase is just kind of how we're changing the allocations. I'd be happy to go over it in detail, but I'm guessing nobody wants that, so.
Moving right along.
Then we have finance here. Similar, labor makes up the biggest portion of the finance budget. But you can see a breakdown of the different operating expenditures for finance. And then lastly, general government. This is one I want to spend a little bit more time on. As you can see, there's this huge spike in 25. And the reason there's this spike in 25 is because of labor. So if you're asking why we went from 200,000 in labor and general government to almost 700,000, that all goes back to our OPEB liability. So the city offers post-employment benefits to its retirees, and there's kind of two tiers. There's one for anyone who retires within CalPERS, and then there's the second for an employee that serves over 20 years, where the city will pay for their monthly health insurance costs. And while we did sunset that for new hires, that benefit's still in place for a number of existing employees, as well as there are a number of employees who have retired under that benefit. And so normally in the past few years, we've been budgeting around $200,000 for our OPEB benefits. But if we were to use our actuarially determined contribution, the amount we should be setting aside each year is close to $700,000. And this is one of those where we can have a longer discussion on how we want to approach it. The idea behind why we should be setting aside the full $700,000 or the full actuarially determined contribution amount is because really we want to be paying for the benefits we're offering while we're offering them. Right. So if we look at kind of where we're projected out, 20, 30 years from now, we might be spending $500,000, $600,000 a year on OPEB benefits, but we'd be paying that out using paying for, and that's future finance director 40 years from now. They shouldn't be paying for our labor costs today. And so that full ADC amount is what it would take for us if we were to pay that amount, and it would fluctuate and change year over year, to kind of close that gap in 17 years. I'm not saying the final budget we're going to present requesting the full ADC amount, because you can see it put a big impact on kind of our operating expenditure totals, but it's something we need to work towards where we are fully funding that ADC amount. And so when we kind of present the budget, I might give a couple slides to the subject and topic, but it's really a kind of a matter of fairness. If we're offering a benefit to an employee today, if I'm getting a benefit, really this current budget should be paying for that benefit, and we shouldn't be burdening 30 years from now budget with the benefit that I earn today. And so that's kind of the argument. There are a number of cities that just do pay as you go, and that's what we have done historically. And there's nothing that says we can't do that. We could keep paying the $200,000 or so a year, and then it'll go up every year. But we could keep paying just on a pay as you go basis. It's really just, in my opinion, kind of a question of fairness. Is it fair to give me a benefit today and force a city 30 years from now to pay for that benefit when we could have paid for it or should have planned to pay for it today? But $700,000 is a big gap to go from a $200,000 to $700,000. I think you saw that in some of the accounts. And so there's some things we can do to maybe smooth that over so it's not quite as big of a bite to take all in one year. And then lastly, insurance. Again, there's the details for insurance. And some of these numbers we need to look at if our amount of litigation we've had over the last couple years is less next year. That number might be something we can look at decreasing. But again, I was looking more at kind of the looking past. I haven't talked to Scott, kind of looking forward of what we can expect. And so these numbers are likely to change. Tried to go on the high end just so we're kind of getting I don't want to say a worst case, but a high-end estimate, if you will, on the operating expenditures. And then lastly, the vehicle maintenance with the garage. You can see a breakdown of their operating expenditures here. So we're coming to the very end, probably over the 30 minutes I said I'd do it in, but here's a breakdown of the labor based on the department. And again, it's comparing fiscal year 20, but fiscal year 20's budget, so that's a pre-COVID number, all the way to fiscal year 25. Right now in the current budget from a FTE standpoint, we are looking to increase the FTE count at the city by 1.6 employees. One of that being a new maintenance lead worker, and then some increased hours for our part-time harbor sanitation as well as our part-time harbor patrol. Again, these are all numbers that could change or fluctuate as we work through the budget, but this is kind of currently where the asks were as far as staffing.
So that bottom line number in 25, since this thing is in the way, is what?
I believe it is 76.
Okay.
So we're still down from a FTE standpoint from our pre-COVID numbers. One thing to keep in mind with the harbor is we did have 1.6 employees as fuel dock manager and fuel dock attendant. And so as we don't operate the fuel dock now, that's kind of a natural decrease, if you will. But there is a breakdown for all the departments, so you can kind of see how the staffing has changed from fiscal year 20, the pre-COVID budget, to the current consideration. So with that, I know that was a lot of information. And so the whole idea was really to give you the information now, not to come with questions tonight, though I'm happy to answer any questions. But over the next 4 to 6 weeks, as we're developing the budget, to give you the opportunity to review. And if you have questions, you can come to either myself or any of the department heads. They're the ones that populated the number, so they should be able to explain what they're going to be spending it on. But we're happy to answer any of those questions either tonight or at future meetings. And my plan is to put a copy of this presentation on the finance page, and I'll email it out to council. Just wanted to emphasize that this is a draft number. We're still working on these figures. Every number in here could change. I think it does give a good picture of what we're looking at as far as our plan for next year. But if there are things that we're not currently doing that you would like to see incorporated into the budget, so I know a council member has commented before on, incorporating more opportunities for, servicing our unhoused population. And kind of how we can do that is through how we prioritize funding in the budget. So if there are priorities that you're afraid aren't being met within the operating budget, at the next couple meetings or outside of the meetings would be a good time to have those conversations. You have them with myself, but probably Dave would be the best person to have those conversations with. And that way we can make sure we're incorporating your priorities into our operating budgets.
Any questions?
How'd I do, Devin?
Thank you. Once again,
Gave it my
Matt.
best.
You nailed it. Okay.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, consent calendar.
Thank you, Mayor. Consent calendar approval of the minutes from the April 19th, 2024 regular city council meeting. And item 2, authorize city staff to publish a request for proposals for consultant services to conduct a classification and compensation study.
Okay. Well, and on that compensation study, you were gonna get the results by, with the timeline, when would those come in?
Jocelyn's put that together. We're looking to get the results. If we go out and get the results, I think late summer, early fall, you want to cover that? We have two labor contracts that actually have, commitment to have them in by the end of the year. So our goal is to have everything available by the end of December.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so we're looking to go through the procurement process right now and then come back in July to award a contract for the top consultant. And then, by the end of the year, have something to prepared to propose to council.
Okay, and any of those increases then, assuming there will be something, would take effect July 1 or January?
Of 2025.
Yeah, January or July?
We'd be looking July. The current 3-year agreements that we have with all the labor unions right now, the 3-year agreements end June 30th, 2025.
I see.
So our goal is to have all this in place so we incorporate into the new agreements.
Way ahead of the ballgame. That's awesome. Okay. Council, what's your pleasure?
I'll move to approve items 1 and 2. on
I'll
consent.
second.
Moved and seconded. No further comment. Call for the vote.
Councilmember Lavelle?
Aye.
Councilmember Schickling?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ponce?
Aye.
Mayor Marshall?
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 absent, Councilmember De La Rosa.
Okay.
Under general business, item 3, appointing mayor pro tem. Council at this time, you should nominate and vote on a member of the city council to serve as the mayor pro tem.
Well, I'm just saying I'd be happy to have any of you, so you all decide.
And no offense, Michael, but I wanted to nominate Lisa, because, she's been on, this is her second term, and I think it would be good experience, and, be a nice way for her to learn some more.
Thank you.
Then I'll second it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moved and seconded. Call for the vote.
Councilmember Lavelle,
Aye.
Councilmember Schickling,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ponce,
Aye.
Mayor Marshall.
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 absent, Councilmember De La Rosa.
Okay. Audit Committee.
Audit Committee, appoint 2 members of the City Council to serve as the Audit Committee.
I'm on it currently with Mary, so.
Do you want to keep it, or do you want that, do you want to be on the Audit Committee, Mr.?
I'll take,
Huh?
I'll take it.
You want to
Okay.
take my spot?
Okay, you'll take the audit, and then you take the audit?
Do you want to
and-
keep it,
and-
or do you want to?
I don't care, it's fine. Yeah, I'll keep it.
So you two? Okay, so Michael and Mary,
So, yeah, do we need to just appoint, right?
I appoint.
Yeah. I
Okay.
do appoint.
Okay. Item number 5.
Item number 5, we're going to have Devin address this, but at this point, we'd like to ask council to authorize the city manager.
That last item, the audit committee.
What?
We have to vote, or what are you saying?
Yes, you have to vote on the audit committee appointments.
Okay.
Oh, I'll move to appoint Councilmember Schickling and Councilmember Ponce to the Audit Committee.
I'll second. Call for the vote.
Councilmember Ponce,
Aye.
Councilmember Schickling,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Lavelle,
Aye.
Mayor Marshall.
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 absent, Councilmember De La Rosa.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, and then item number 5, we're asking council authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute a lease agreement with Santiago Brian Zwick, DBA Avalon Smokehouse, Inc., for the concession at Joe Machado Field. And Devin's going to address this. We're very excited about this, this opportunity here.
Good evening, City Council. The RFP was actually officially solicited on February 26th for the operation of our concession stand at Joe Machado Field. The city staff conducted a non-mandatory pre-proposal meeting up at Joe Machado on March 20th. We were really excited. We had 12 people in attendance representing 4 potential respondents. They walked through the facility with myself, the community services manager, David Hart, as well as Jeffrey Hernandez, our maintenance superintendent. So the applicants got a broad overview of the city's expectation to run the facility as well as to maintain the facility. We were really excited and gratified when the RFP closed on April 1st that we had 4 respondents. This is maybe the 3rd or 4th time that I've participated on this RFP process for this specific contract, and we were super gratified. And I hope you saw in the quality of the applications that we received. They were very, very thoughtful and thorough. 3 of the proposals conformed to our evaluation, or to our RFP template that we requested, but they were all very thoughtful. The city staff evaluated the proposals first on the standard criteria that's outlined in the RFP regarding conflict of interest and clarity and content. But in terms of content of the proposal, we considered the following elements and ranked the applications accordingly, and that was the food or menu, the proposer's overall restaurant experience, and their marketing and vision for making it a real successful operation. The proposals were reviewed by myself, the city manager, and our community services manager, David. And we decided unanimously that the proposer that stood out most significantly was provided by Santiago Brian Zwick, doing business as Avalon Smokehouse. Not only did the proposal demonstrate that the respondent had significant restaurant experience, but he outlined a commitment to invest in the facility and build partnerships in the community. So we're asking that the City Council authorize the city manager to negotiate a lease agreement for that applicant. Who's in the audience right now if you have any other questions?
Well, since you're being recommended, I don't know how okay, we'll have the vote first, and then you can come up and say something, Santiago. How's that? You can't get away with just sitting there and smiling. No, anybody, yeah, the proposal was really incredible. I don't think we've ever seen anything like that before, so thank you. It looks great. I'm looking forward to a different menu for Avalon because it's something that we don't really have here, so that's very exciting. As a golfer, I'm looking forward to being able to call and say, okay, I'll meet you up top when I get to the 4th hole and pick up our lunch. So and just sitting out there. So anyway, it's very exciting. I don't know if any of you want to make a comment.
Yeah, super excited about pop-ups at Casino Dock.
Yeah.
It's a shame that that just sits there, so, you know, and all the catering and the pop-ups and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, it's all good.
Yeah, no,
And thanks for including some information on special event menus as well. I think that's something that we haven't necessarily seen from any
Right.
previous vendors, so, yeah, it was very professional, well put together, and I love the local nods that are throughout the names of the menu items as well, so.
yeah.
Way to capture it. I think it's great.
You had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
So then I'll I'll make a motion to authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute a lease agreement with Santiago Brian Zwick, doing business as Avalon Smokehouse, Inc., for the concession at Joe Machado Field.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments, or did you receive anything? Okay, let's call for the vote.
Councilmember Ponce?
Yes?
Councilmember Schickley?
Absolutely.
Mayor Pro Tem Ponce? Or, I'm
Aye.
sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Lavelle?
Aye.
Mayor Marshall?
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 absent. Councilmember De La Rosa?
Come on up and say a few words, Santiago.
Well, thank you guys so much for this opportunity. It definitely means a lot to me and my family, and I'm just so excited, like you said, to bring a different food to the island, to really go into some of these southern tastes that are taking off in the food industry, and to provide you guys with a little family heritage or recipes that have been passed down through generations, as well as build on more that come from this community as well. I wasn't expecting to speak, but thank you so much.
Well, my husband's from New Orleans, so if you need a couple of recipes, I'll throw some your way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Always open to
Like
listen.
collard greens.
Send them my way.
And grits for breakfast. Shrimp, cheesy shrimp grits.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they're the best.
And I think one of the biggest things that I'm excited for about this project too is, you know, I'm really going out of my way to get a custom smoker that fits Avalon, that fits the safety requirements, and really it's all self-contained. It's made out of stainless steel. It'll take some time to get built, but it's a custom build that's as deserving as you know, this town deserves. I mean, I'm gonna go for it for you guys.
Excellent. Also, let us know when we want to have a ribbon cutting.
Hey, what?
A ribbon cutting.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All righty. All right. Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you guys.
Yes. Yeah.
And finally, item number 6, seeking approval of the plan is presented for modifications and striping along Wrigley Road in the space designated in the handout, including 5 curves between the Pet Cemetery and Buena Vista Point, and Mr. Greenlaw will present this.
Good evening, Council. Bob Greenlaw. This item considers the approval of a traffic safety plan along Wrigley Road from the Pet Cemetery up through Buena Vista Point. The current condition on Wrigley Road, it's a steep road that has a lot of complex, tight complex curves, and those include what we're considering Catalina Pet Cemetery, right across from 333 Wrigley Road, Buena Vista Point, and Three Palms. So why don't we take a look at the plan itself. I actually have 5 curves on there. The one additional one is above this, so when our consultant came out, he identified another one that I'll alert the island company that they should put some signing and striping on, but that's that next curve up the road. So what we're considering tonight for that plan approval is location 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the first one's at the Pet Cemetery, and all of these are common. They're in common with a downhill, tight, complex curve. So it has horizontal and vertical curvature to the road, and it's in a hairpin. So what the consultant came up with, you know, we have a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit here within the city of Avalon. These all look like they need to be 10 miles an hour. So they'll be signed on the downhill direction with a 10-mile-an-hour warning sign. And they'll have a centerline stripe, so as you approach the curve, you'll see something's different. It's changing in the road. So there'll be a yellow centerline stripe. There'll be that sign, and the tight portion of the curve that's downhill will be a 1 foot wider than the inside portion, so 11 foot versus 10 foot, because you have a little more necessity for that width to be able to negotiate those curves. So you see that at the Pet Cemetery, and then you see that kind of serpentine little curve there at the Middle Terrace Road.
Right.
And that's where a majority of the accidents are happening, so as in that downhill direction. And then we have the curve that's at 333 is the next one, and then at Buena Vista Point. So essentially all the same type of signage, markings, alert the drivers that something's different is occurring. This will be done by our own crew. We'll purchase the signs and our own crew with that striping machine that we bought years back. We'll go up there and lay this out and get it done.
So it's a solid stripe.
Solid stripe.
And then, what about the no passing? I mean, those are so dangerous already, but even no passing signs other places in town, like Pebbly Beach Road, people are passing right and left. And I know we don't want to stripe that, we probably can't because of the width of the road, but.
So we do have a striping, not to get off the subject here, but we do have a striping plan for Pebbly Beach Road.
Okay.
And that will be after we finish the revetment work that's coming up,
all right.
okay? So because we'll be doing some paving on the road, so we'll actually get out there and put some striping, and it'll be likely the same kind of thing, as it'll alert you in the curves.
Yes.
But then it'll put some edge lines on the road so that it gets you the sense, so there's some friction to slow down, and there's also an area for the pedestrians to be with that edge line on the road, so.
Excellent.
But the most important thing here is I want to bring up is that the reason why we are seeking approval of this plan is both to make the community aware of this project that we're doing, because it's been requested by all our emergency service providers, both the sheriff and also fire, but also some of the businesses like the golf cart rentals, because there are some accidents that are happening because people are not used to these roads on everyday travel. But also to comply with the requirements of Government Code 830.6, which gives a public entity design immunity. So as we put this plan in place, and we've used our best engineer and judgment and done a study on it, one of the three elements that if we do have to have a defense, then we have to establish that this was a discretionary approval of this plan prior to construction. So that's what we're doing tonight.
Can I just say something, because I had told Dave this, he didn't know it. Wrigley Terrace used to be striped. When they first rebuilt the road, they restriped it, or they did stripe.
The whole thing was striped?
From Mount Ada all the way down.
Oh, okay.
It was just never kept up, but it has been striped before, so.
So we'd like to try what is something that we can maintain. If we've got to add to this, we start with this, and then we get input from everybody, and if there needs to be added to, we will.
But I like the idea of adding the signage, that's.
Yes, I do too. Yes.
So do we need to
If there's no further questions.
make a motion to approve the plan as presented for modifications and striping along Wrigley Road in the space designated, including the 4 curves between the Pet Cemetery and Buena Vista Point?
Second.
Call for the vote?
Councilmember Ponce?
Aye.
Councilmember Schickling?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Lavelle?
Aye.
Mayor Marshall?
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 absent. Councilmember De La Rosa.
If there's nothing else, meeting adjourned.